So what I informed in Power 225 was that I would suggest that they present or represent their proposal to the group. I believe that preliminarily they've done so on yesterday, and I chime in where necessary. My understanding, Mary Kate, you're going to talk about the trafficking of persons with intellectual disabilities. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So go ahead and give the group an overview of what that proposal does. And if there's anything that may be missing from your talking points that I identify, I'll definitely chime in and cover you.
Perfect. I apologize, everyone. Okay, so we are proposing that a new definition, I'm sorry, of commercial sexual exploitation is created for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and additionally to increase the criminal penalty for persons who commit human trafficking when the trafficking involves a person with a disability. And the justification, um, sorry, I just see, can you hear us? Oh, I'm sorry. The justification really is on the basis of our own experience working with survivors of human trafficking. Especially over the last year, we've seen an increase of victims who have intellectual or developmental disabilities. And at the same time, there's not a lack of awareness that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are more at risk of being trafficked. And as you all know, people with disabilities are more likely to be victims of violent crimes. And so we're seeing the same thing with trafficking. And so the vulnerabilities of people with disabilities are heightened by the special care and services upon which they depend to achieve relative equity and inclusion in society. And what we're seeing is that traffickers target people with disabilities in order to psychologically coerce and control them by simultaneously meeting their most basic needs, of which housing and food is the most important, while also isolating them from the essential services and care they require. And so the reality is that barring no disability, that traffickers already exploit people who have increased vulnerabilities, and they do so through psychological coercion and control. And in our experience, that same dynamic is just even elevated even more with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, because traffickers are expressly targeting and preying on people with disabilities by isolating them from their support system. And so, we're really passionate about this, and we believe that the use of force, fraud, and coercion, which is the essential test for proven human trafficking, we believe that it is inherent in the act of trafficking of a person with an intellectual and developmental disability. And we would like the law to not only reflect that the inherent use of force, fraud, and coercion when trafficking people with disabilities, but also to increase the criminal penalties for traffickers who target individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And, I'll give an example of one case.
So this is Michelle speaking. I'm with Mary Kate. We had a case where it was someone who had developmental disabilities, and when we went to court with her against her traffickers, basically the court said that the traffickers would get more time for taking her disability versus her being trafficked. So it's kind of like we want to get that justice for survivors who it's like you matter more than the check. So we want to make sure that they get the justice that is deserved for the traffickers, which is, getting a prosecution for human trafficking and making sure that the penalties are higher. And we currently have ages 18 to 21 for youth where they remove the force, fraud, and coercion. And they also increase the penalty with the time. versus anyone over the age of 21. So we kind of want to push that requirement on that level of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So that's our main reason for wanting to do it this way.
And I'll add one last thing. We met with the Developmental Disabilities Council yesterday, and they are supportive of this proposal. But what I told them and what I'll tell you is we recognize that we're not the experts on this issue as far as individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so we really wanted to come to the table and bring the experts on board and get your feedback. Because while we understand victims and survivors of human trafficking, we understand that this is a special population. In our eyes, it should be treated as such, a protected population by the law. So if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. I feel like we ran through that quickly. So if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Jim Mitchell. I was wondering how you're defining for the purposes of this statute who is disabled.
Yes, that's a great question. I conducted a lot of research into this because I understand that this is an issue that some of our current laws, both federally, and even locally, may use antiquated language to define or to determine disability. And so I did a lot of research to make sure that we're utilizing a holistic and broad definition. And so I propose, or when looking and doing research, obviously it will be passed on to the legislators to define it, but we are really pushing for a broader definition that takes into account, not just one factor, because I know in the past they've used like IQ as a determinant, and we know that that just does not capture the whole picture by any means. And so looking through some federal court cases, I see that they use three factors. One is functioning deficits, the other is adaptive deficits, and then the onset of these deficits as a minor. But I really also want to make clear that we're coming, again, y'all are the experts, y'all know better. So if y'all have any guidance on what would be the most appropriate, we certainly want to heed all of your advice.
Well, let me add to the point.
Yes, Leslie.
I think we can help the group easily locate where it's already defined in the criminal code, in the context that this is legislation or proposed legislation to change something within the criminal code, keeping the definition in step with what's already in the criminal code. The definition for intellectual disability is located in the Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 905.5.1.
Yeah.
And it has its own section. It's a lengthy section on what actually subsection H actually defines what the criminal code defines as a intellectual disability. So that's where the attorneys who are going to be responsible for writing this legislation, they're going to look to that, and it's always it's always an effort to ensure that we keep the language consistent throughout the code. We don't want the language to be different in one area of the criminal code and then it be something else. It reads something else in a completely different area of the code. So the language has to be consistent. So the definition come from the definition is already in statute.
Yeah. Yep.
So to carry on that discussion.
This is Bambi. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a very limited time frame. So just to let y'all know, this legislation is being supported. Leslie Chambers is with the governor's policy team. This is being supported through the First Lady's initiative with human trafficking. And so if y'all have questions, we can definitely get Leslie, or if Mary Kate wants to leave her email, if y'all want to reach out to her, if y'all put that in the chat, and so people could reach out for other questions.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you all.
Okay, so let's go back to the special school district legislation. I think I saw him on. Maybe.
Hello, everyone. Are you all able to see me? This is Superintendent Garrett.
Mm-mm.
Can someone
Yes, we can,
spotlight?
we can see you and we can hear you. Go for it.
I see.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Out of respect for the time limit of 5 minutes, I want to again briefly share what I also shared yesterday. We as Special School District are proposing to make the SSD, Special School District, one school system, one school district concept. Currently, the special school district, as I explained yesterday, includes special school programs, SSP, which includes about 15 facilities for special education that we push in, including Office of Juvenile Justice, Office of Citizens with Developmental Disabilities, Office of Behavioral Health, and Department of Corrections. And then the other agency is Louisiana School for the Deaf and Visually Impaired. So technically, they're two separate state agencies. And I would like to have the school system become one so we can use our resources better. I think that this will reflect what other states are doing. As I mentioned yesterday, SSD Special School District in St. Louis, Missouri has a system that partners with the local education agencies providing special education services. And we have had a unique opportunity within the COVID pandemic to get things right and really prioritize the needs of students with disabilities, where we're seeing the glaring gaps that are happening. And so we want to coordinate the system of support, students within the special schools, the special programs, and statewide resources through outreach, that we can be a resource for other school systems across the state. And to be honest with you, we want to provide a model not only in Louisiana, but eventually nationwide. So the only change here, I wanted to clarify that this will not be a fundamentally changing a lot, but will help to streamline some things. Currently, I report to the state superintendent of education. The SSD budget is under LDOE, and then the LSDVI budget is under the special schools. So with this new system of one district, we would have a board. We would have a school board, which we are proposing to keep us with good guidance and integrity. And these would be appointed board members by the governor and would need to be confirmed, just as I do as superintendent. And this would allow advocates to have a seat on the board when and where appropriate and appointed by the governor, and have people who have a stake in improving the lives and opportunities of students with disabilities in the state of Louisiana. So this is what I am proposing to the next level. And I'm open to any questions or concerns. And if none, I am always happy to have you all reach out to me at any point for clarification. And again, our goal is to make sure that our young scholars have the same opportunity to a free and appropriate public education, just like any other student in the state of Louisiana, whether they have a disability or not.
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you have any feedback, input, response from the alumni of those institutions about how they feel about this?
Yes. So right now, let's see, on Tuesday, we are going to have our Special Education Advisory Council meeting, and we will be reviewing the new strategic plan that supports this concept. So from when I first joined in the fall of 2019, we started the discussion and ideas of concerns regarding what's going on and the feeling of a loss of identity for the school, for example, the school for the deaf and the school for visually impaired, where it was where they had their own identities when they were separate school campuses. And now being on one campus, they felt a loss of identity. And so my position and my intention is to make sure that we are just like any other school district, where each school system leader and the leaders in the schools are able to have control of their schools. When I joined, it seemed that the district had a lot of control and involvement, which is fine, but it may be that is what is needed going forward. I'm about empowering the school system themselves and have them be accountable for the students and those services and those results as well. So my opinion is that this approach will allow the district to play a role in the focus of the operations and the budget, and the school can focus on the academics. And that's what they're there for. And they can also maintain their identity.
A quick question. This is Chris. So you did mention consolidation of different schools, and I understand your example, but we're also talking about schools that specifically cater to individuals that are participating or involved in the criminal justice system, the juvenile justice system. Would this allow the opportunity to combine basically that particular population with, say, one of the schools that exclusively caters to people with, say, developmental disabilities?
Okay, so from what I'm understanding of your question, I was sharing about the schools, now the special school programs. Part of what I'm hoping to achieve is, again, because, well, let me back up a little bit and share more. With the special schools, we have control of the facilities and the campus, and the special school programs, we don't have that. We work in partnership with those entities. Like, for instance, OJJ, we work in partnership with them, and we push in for special education programs. They run their facilities there themselves. I received special education services from SSD in St. Louis, Missouri, and how that worked was a partnership with other organizations who were responsible for education services, and those special education services were pushed in, and that partnership works if we're able to truly collaborate. And part of the challenge of SSD is you have SSP here, and then you have the you have the special schools, and you have the special school programs that are separated. And so we want to work now to have a better relationship. And that's a perfect example with LSDVI, or Louisiana School for the Visually Impaired, from March 2018's report, said that one thing they really recognized and that stood out for me is when they were talking about LSVI, they were living in the shadow of LSD, the School for the Deaf. And so they feel like they had less value and less resources. And I really took that to heart and said that this cannot happen. So what I've done is I have myself an assistant for financial administration and an assistant for learning services, our special and the special assistant, the four of us. From just this past October and ongoing, we are working to closely support LSVI, to support them and to set up a structure that works for them, that allows the school system leaders to feel empowered and supported to lead. And with that model, we're seeing that it's working very well. So we are doing the same thing for the School for the Deaf now. And we would like to also do the same thing with the special school programs. And so we will have a better relationship and system of expectations that is really aligning. I'm not trying to take up a one size fits all approach, because we need the students to have their individual needs met. We share the same language and set of expectations of how to serve our young scholars, though. And we have leadership meetings, for example, and before we had reports at those meetings. And what I'm interested in is our leadership team functioning like a problem-solving team. For example, when we meet, we may bring up an issue, and then others can bring up solutions. Administrators and leaders can offer some solutions because everyone has their area of expertise. So we're coming to the table with solutions. So that's the expectation that I set up within the special school programs, and now with the special schools as well. Once we become that one district and we transition that way, we will be more streamlined and more cooperative. We're already doing the groundwork now to promote that working together as a team. And so we will scale that up to the renegotiating of our relationship with the facilities and better provide the services and support for all students with disabilities. And it's a work in progress, but we are definitely committed to this work.
Thank you.
I hope I answered your question.
Yes.
Okay, you guys, we're running a little bit low on time. If you have any other questions, maybe could you put your email address maybe in the chat box so that people can follow up with any other questions that they may have? Thank you. Okay, so the next one is I think Andrew Mull is here with AARP to talk about the community choice waiver.
Hey, Kelly.
Andrew, you have the
Thanks.
floor.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Bambi. And good to see Senator Boudreaux on the call as well. So thank you for this opportunity. I'll just put this out there now. If you have any questions and you want to email me or ask offline, you can email me at amuhl@aarp.org, and I'll put it in the chat when I finish. But you can holler at me offline so folks can continue the agenda after I finish. We have two issues that AARP is working on for the 2021 legislative session, and I should probably mention that AARP is part of the Live at Home Louisiana Coalition, which is a larger group of organizations. Our big challenge is eliminating the waiting list of 11,500 individuals who have requested what's known as a community choices waiver. These are for adults with onset disabilities who want to live at home and want alternatives to nursing home care. So we have over 11,000 folks who are waiting for this waiver as that alternative. And this waiver provides essential home or community services to help with bathing, dressing, some of the daily activities that individuals might need. And right now, the wait time for one of these waivers is about 7.5 years. And so, as you can probably imagine, a lot of individuals don't live long enough to be able to get the waiver. They go on the list and then, some have to wait up to 7.5 years. So we'll be advocating for two things. The first is a bill that would create a fund called the Community Options Waiver Fund, which would designate that 12% of all surplus funds would go towards community choices waivers. I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with the NOW Fund, the New Opportunities Waiver Fund. This would be the same thing, but for people who experience a disability after the age of 22. So at some point in their lifetime after they're an adult. So it doesn't change any, but it doesn't change any existing statutes. It would not affect any current funds, and it certainly wouldn't take money from other funds or redirect how much goes there. This would be just a separate fund that would be able to accommodate up to 12% of surplus funds, and those funds would go towards funding more of these community choices waivers for individuals. They're very cost-effective waivers. I think the average cost of a waiver is around $25,000 per year. So much more affordable than other levels of care in the long-term care continuum. That's the first thing that we'll be working on. Don't have a bill filed yet. Once a bill is filed, we'll certainly share the information with Bambi and the council. Second issue that we'll be advocating for is a line item in in House Bill 1, the state budget bill, to allocate funding for 500 new waiver slots. The department has been able to allocate any kind of extra funds to these waivers over the last few years when there is a surplus. The last couple of years, it's been challenging. So we're hoping that this year, if new money is recognized, they will be able to allocate 500 new waiver slots. So that's what we'll be asking for from the legislature this year. So again, if you'd like to be part of the Live at Home Louisiana Coalition, which really focuses on this particular issue, please email me, or you can of course ask Chris Rodriguez, who's on the council, who invited me to this opportunity. So thank you, Chris. We're available if you have any questions. So thank you to Bambi and the council for allowing us to present.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Andrew? Quick questions?
You can put them in the chat if you want. I'll stick around for a couple minutes. If you want to ask them in the chat, just so Bambi can get back to her agenda.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Chris, do you want to go ahead and talk about the proposals and what we have next on the agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to start by thanking everybody for taking the time, both at this meeting and the previous meeting, to introduce your legislative concepts and legislative proposed ideas related to people with disabilities. I think we saw a wide breadth and diverse number of creative solutions to issues and barriers to people across the spectrum of disability. So again, and on behalf of Kelly and I, we want to thank you for taking the time to introduce these to us. I think the difficult part is trying to figure out, and again, this is the first time that we've had a legislative committee, trying to figure out how we decide on the process by which the council will support different bills. So kind of the process that Kelly and I agreed upon is that we'll have just a little bit of further discussion over the ideas, concepts, and legislation that have been proposed in this meeting and the previous meeting. And then we will take those and make recommendations to the full council later this afternoon over the concepts, bills, pieces of legislation, ideas that we recommend the full council support. At this time, again, we're kind of treading lightly since this is the first time we've tried this process. I think we're going to maintain bills that we would support. I don't think we're interested at this time, and I don't think anything has been brought to our attention where we would want the council, or that we would recommend the council actively oppose anything. Perhaps in the future we'll come across an issue that we feel compelled to take those types of positions. But right now, since it's our first time to kind of do this, we wanted to be more supportive than anything. Kelly and I and Bambi had the opportunity over the last week to continue to collect information about these proposals and hear from different stakeholders and try and understand them better, with the idea of, again, trying to figure out how we were going to facilitate this conversation, provided that there's so many great ideas that have been put forth. So I think we looked at each of them. We made phone calls and we solicited more information over ones. I mean, there's clearly some in here that I would imagine just would solicit universal support and really are not controversial whatsoever. But we did want to open it up for a larger conversation on some of the proposals that we've heard mixed messages from. And I think what we wanted to do, and again, we're a committee, so really Kelly and I's job is to help facilitate the conversation and for us all to agree on what we want to do. But we thought we might want to just bring up and have very brief discussions over some of the pieces of legislation that we have heard differing opinions on from stakeholders, particular stakeholders that are on the advisory committee. So I do want to point our attention to, and I know this is a very difficult one, the requirements for psychosocial rehabilitation services. So for this one, this was, I think, starting from a point of everybody agreeing, we all agree that in many circumstances, especially in the mental health arena, there is a lack of providers out there to meet the needs of individuals who require their services. And I think this proposal aims to widen the number of individuals that would be credentialed or able to provide those services by decreasing the educational requirements to a certain extent. Definitely not getting rid of them altogether, but certainly lessening them with the intention of increasing the pool of individuals that could then provide those services, which I think we would all agree increasing the workforce is important. So all the people that have those particular needs are able to gain the supports that they need from individuals. However, I know that when we first introduced this, there was some, there is certainly, I think, a substantial debate as to whether or not that is the correct approach right now. Do we want to start to lessen the credentials of these individuals in order to try and create a solution or not? And I think there were a couple of people on this committee that had some concerns over this one. I don't know if we want to just kind of very briefly rehash this, or if we want to maybe commit to just kind of keeping an eye on this, but perhaps not taking a position at this time. So I'm going to open it up to folks' thoughts. Let's say maybe 5 to 10 minutes of discussion on this one.
Amber Boykin has her hand raised.
Go ahead, Amber.
Those of you that were on the legislative roundtable session, you probably already heard what I'm about to say, but just to quickly reiterate, I have concerns already about what's currently in place with the level of training that's there, and having firsthand knowledge working with some of these students that they have been working with. I would be very hesitant to lessening any training standards for this group of people. There's also concerns too in the way that they represent themselves to the parents about their training. Parents who are consumers that don't know about mental health, they think, well, this is my kid's counselor, and that this is the same as, a licensed counselor. And so there's already concerns about how that is really explained to parents about the background that's currently in place. So I'd just be really hesitant to lessen it, because it is possible that sometimes just having a warm body is worse than no body. If you don't know what you're doing with some of these kids that have significant trauma and significant behavior needs, you can do further damage by, even if it's just that you are occupying a place as a therapist that perhaps someone who is trained to work with that child would occupy, if the parent knew the difference in the training standards and what was out there. So it in my opinion, it comes down to a consumer protection issue. And I already think what's in place is really treading in a gray area as it is. And so I would not recommend supporting it at the very least. And I believe that some of the other groups, like the psychological associations, I would doubt that they would support it. I know the Louisiana School Psychological Association would actively oppose it.
Thank you. Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that. I know you provided your thoughts last time. I've been doing a lot of thinking about that. Tell a little bit, just very, very briefly, about your background so we know kind of where you're coming from. I think that's important.
Okay, sorry. I'm a school psychologist. I've been a school psychologist in North Louisiana for 14 years. And so I work in Louisiana public schools right now. For the past 9 years, I've been in Lincoln Parish schools. And so I work with, there's a lot of overlap and work with a lot of these kids that are being seen by these professionals, and have had a lot of opportunity to talk to parents who have expressed confusion about the background of these people that are working with their kids and how it was presented to them.
Okay. Is there anybody that wants to say anything, perhaps on the other side of this? I'm seeing in the chat box a few other people that seem to agree with the sentiment that Amber so articulately put forth. So hearing none.
Katie Corkin has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Corkin.
Hey guys, this is Katie Corkin. I'm the one that presented this bill a few weeks ago, and I appreciate Amber's feedback. And that is a concern in general that my association has, with numerous of the, people that provide these PSR services. And it's something that we're working on because we believe that it's not a systemic issue. It's some providers that allow these things, to happen. There's been tremendous efforts in the past 3 or 4 years to reform the MHR program, and we're slowly getting there. Before, Luno brought a bill 18 to address it. The minimum requirements for someone to provide PSR services was simply a high school diploma. So we wanted to address that immediately, when Senator Luno brought that bill. And so we made it to where they had to have certain degrees. And then we've also recently, in the past year, advocated with LDH to increase the supervision hours every month. And we're working on some other things as far as more often receiving the curriculum training, updates to best practices, other things like that, that we're just kind of working directly with LDH and OBH so that we don't, have to put into law. But I absolutely understand, the concern, because it's a concern of ours too, but we're just working behind the scenes to address those. But there's still a need. There's a licensed mental health professional, shortage across the country, but especially here. And so we're just trying to meet the need for our quality providers that are giving excellent services to people that need it. So.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I think we all agree that there's certainly an issue. I don't think there's any dispute that there's a shortfall in terms of the individuals that are providing these services, and certainly a robust need. It's just a matter of how do we solve this issue? How do we work? And I think everybody appreciates all the work that you're doing in terms of the things with OBH and LDH to try and heighten consumer protection, I think, as we had mentioned previously. And I want you to know, whatever happens, we're not going to be making a recommendation for the council to oppose this. It might be a situation, because we seem to be divided, that we
and I understand completely.
Okay. So I think, I don't know if we want to kind of vote on it, but I think what I'm feeling, and obviously I'm just trying to facilitate a conversation, is that perhaps because there seems to be some disagreement on this, perhaps we just decide to just remain neutral as the council. Obviously, each of us represent different organizations and ourselves and our families and things like that, and we can have our own, obviously, opinions at the Capitol and things like that that we might do. But as the council, I think that we might be most comfortable just sitting this particular piece of legislation out of our recommendation to the council. Is there any objection to that? Okay. The other one that there's been, maybe I've just been most curious about it, that I did want to talk about, is the details related to the proposal for the increase for the provider rate increase for HCBS services. What is kind of difficult about this one is that there seems to be two schools of thought. I mean, there's one school of thought, which I think most people agree that provider rates need to be increased among HCBS providers. I think everybody agrees to that. It goes again towards trying to increase the workforce and have DSWs be more in a competitive vocation, and certainly increases the provider's ability to do trainings and all this good stuff that will ultimately provide or aims to provide a better experience for individuals who are beneficiaries of HCBS services. I think from what I understand, and anybody can chime in here, there seems to be a division in the disability community as to whether or not the legislation should dictate specifically that there should be a increase to the DSWs and what that should look like, as opposed to kind of a more, providers have been in this business for a long time. They know what they're doing. They're responsible. They're business owners. They know they need more money, and they should be, acknowledged to be able to spend that money in the best interest of their clients, in the best interest of their businesses. Now, the proposal we have in front of us dictates that we would advocate for the $27.9 million, of which we'll get a match from the federal government. So when it washes on the other side, it will be even greater than that, probably somewhere around 50 million. Plus there's another COVID relief HCBS dollars coming down the pipe for this. But ours says that of those, basically 70 cents of every dollar needs to be directly provided to the DSWs. That is in contrast to, I think, what many of the providers will be advocating for, and that is, I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, an increase to, I think, their minimum wage so that no DSW will make under, I think it's $8.20. And that they would be, it's not to say that they couldn't pay them more out of the increased, out of that 27.9 million, but it wouldn't be mandated to do that. So there seems to be a fairly significant rift in between kind of what everybody's agreeing on, or there seems to be a difficulty coming to an agreement upon what this should look like, although it seems like everybody agrees that, and I do too, that the providers do need an increase, provided the fact that they've been cut over the years so significantly, and they're still trying to just get back to where they used to be. So I guess I want to open this up. Again, this might fall under a topic where there is just such a divide that perhaps at this point in time, we don't want to make a recommendation on this to the advisory council, or perhaps we amend the language a little bit to be more, kind of less specific and more, we support efforts to increase provider rates, something like that. I'm not sure, but I did want to open it up to get people's thoughts on this. I don't know if others have experienced or learned about or been in meetings where this kind of debate is going on.
Hi, Chris. Good morning. It's Karen Collins. I'm a provider and I serve people in the Waiver program, the community homes, and also before COVID, we had a day program. And I'm 100% behind the DSWs making as much money as we can afford to pay them. They well deserve it. I've had some wonderful staff through the COVID pandemic, through both hurricanes and through the winter storm. My only concern with it is giving the increase to only home and community-based waiver DSWs. I feel that serving people in the community homes and having those DSWs who have worked in a riskier setting, congregate setting, in a more labor-intensive environment, and right now harder to recruit for that environment, and dealing with higher need people, either behaviorally or medically, that to give part of my staff a raise and not them would not only make it harder for me to recruit into the community homes, but it would disincentivize them from wanting to work in the community homes. Already they're going to want to go to the waiver program where they can work with 1 or 2 people instead of more people. So if there's a way, maybe we could just extend the increase to all DSWs and the ICFDD community homes, as well as the home and community-based waiver program. I mean, I think that would help a lot. And it would also support the people that are working in community homes. If there's a way we could do that, maybe just kind of, instead of giving more to one group, maybe give less to everybody, or increase it so everybody gets something, if that was a possibility.
Yeah, I think you bring up an additional kind of divide, our thought that this particular proposal continues to kind of divide people up. And I know there's so many interesting debates over how you kind of divide up Medicaid HCBS funding, because we are kind of siloed into different HCBS versus non-HCBS, OBH, OAS, OCDD, the different waivers and such. So I can certainly appreciate where you're coming from on that one.
Chris, I just want to add one thing for Karen. There is another ask that the providers are asking for, and it does include the ICFs as well as support coordination. So it includes all of them, but it does not direct any payment towards the DSPs. That would be left up to the individual providers to choose where that money is needed and where that money needs to go.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, we definitely need to use it toward the pay increases, because we are in a town where there's, we have Pinecrest down the street. We have other providers in this area. It's very competitive. So we want to get our wages up as high as possible so that we can, incentivize them to stay with us and to be with our company, is what all providers are probably doing right now, is trying to get the wages up as high as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And I know a lot of providers did that during COVID as well. And so some of them have made some of those changes, some of them have not. So however that individual provider feels like it needs to be in the other ask, not in this particular ask.
I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kathy Dwyer asked if you could expand on what the provider's ask is.
The provider's ask is using the COLA, cost of living adjustment index, increasing it by 22.3%, getting the payments are 13 years old right now, the reimbursement rate. So getting it back up to 2021, instead of asking for the full ask, because that is a lot of money, they're asking for half of it. And then which comes out to be $35.5 million in state general funds. And then, but it does not direct dollars in a specific place. There are many providers out there who have different needs and who have done different things. And so just being in, not knowing what that business needs in order to continue to provide the best service that they can, we would leave it up to them and not choose how that would be distributed.
And that 35 million would have some type of match, is that right, Kelly? So it would wash out probably around 6 million?
Yeah, I don't know what the exact full amount is once it hits the match, but I think it's like 62% or something like that. But that was just the number that was given to us from LDH.
Lynette has her hand raised.
Lynette, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, she's coming up with something.
Being on the receiving end for my care, I definitely support increase. Only way to get quality caregivers.
Did y'all hear it? Or
Maybe, I'm sorry.
I can repeat it. It says, being on the receiving end for my care, I certainly support increase. only way to get quality personnel, people, caregivers. Because
I don't think there's, yeah, I don't think there's any dispute that we all agree that there needs to be an increase in the provider reimbursement rate. It's just a matter of some people think that within the language, it should be directly given, or at least a set amount of that should be set aside directly for the person that's actually the DSW.
right.
Which a lot, is that what you're supporting or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm looking at a question I'm not quite understanding. It says, I could see providers only wanting to do this, do home-based if race isn't across the board. I'm not sure.
I think she was referring to Karen's comment about like the people who have the group homes or community homes. If they're not getting the raise, then
Oh, gotcha.
yeah.
This would be for home and community-based services, the ICFs, as well as support coordination.
So I think this is a good discussion. I think this is indicative of all the different perspectives related to this particular proposal. And not unlike necessarily the last one we discussed, there seems to be multiple divisions and points of view on this. And again, because this is the first time that we've been doing this legislative committee, we really want to try and come out, at least I'm hopeful that we will come out the gate supporting things that have, you know, not as much division. Maybe down the road, as we get better acquainted to this process, we'll take more aggressive stances, or we'll insert ourselves into more maybe divisive policies. But provided that there seems to be a lot of division, I guess I would feel most comfortable with us. And of course, again, we all represent ourselves, our families, our different organizations, and we reserve the right to oppose, support, remain neutral in any one of these things individually. But in terms of our recommendation to the council as a whole, or what the council would support, I guess I would feel most comfortable if we just maintain keeping an eye on this legislation as it moves through the process, but not recommending that we necessarily support it at this time.
Jane Horman has her hand raised.
Good. Ms. Harmon, you're on mute.
Since everyone is in agreement upon the financial increases and it needs to touch everywhere, is this something that you're going to try to get into the legislation soon?
So I don't know what this is going to look like on the other end in terms of how it's going to be written up. I guess it depends what the legislature wants to do and wants to try and thread this needle. I mean, as a person who's been involved in legislative advocacy for 15 years on the federal different states, it's never a good time when you go up to the legislature and you have a single group of individuals, being the disability community, all supporting a different version of something and not being able to come to agreeing upon a single unified message to the legislature. So I don't know how they're going to interpret that and what they're going to do and who is going to be successful in getting the language that they want to legislation. So I have I don't know where that stands.
I think both sides will have to go to appropriations and ask for it. And then the legislators will probably ask questions, and if they even, want to support it. And they'll probably want to know why one side is just like Chris said, why is one side wanting one thing versus the other side needing the other thing. And but I think everybody knows that providers need a rate increase. They're working on rate, but I think everybody also wants DSPs to be paid more because they deserve it. They're the ones doing all the work. And so I think we can all agree on that. But I think to say that the same, like that maybe in an area like Shreveport have the same expenses as someone in, let's say, in Bunkie, or is not right. It's not correct. And
Yeah,
that
you're right.
and that different things cost, like car insurance is more, just things
Yeah,
cost more
everything
in different
across the
areas.
state is so different in each place.
It is
Yeah.
so different. And so I think that because of those things right now, when we're not up to 2021, it's
Mhm.
going to be difficult for people to go to the legislature and say, hey, I want this money, but I want them to direct it to a certain place, and then or maybe not, who knows?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I mean, I think we could have a long discussion about how to thread the needle between the, 3, 4 different proposals out there, but what that's going to do is just create a fifth one.
Yeah.
And I don't know how productive that would be.
So
This
so
is,
go ahead. Ma'am.
no, I just want to let you know we have 2 people with their hands raised and we have
Oh, go ahead.
14 minutes left. And it's Amber Boykin and Senator Gerald Boudreaux.
Okay. Senator, go ahead.
I just was going to reiterate, I think Chris and Kelly have really put their arms around the issue. So, our best opportunity is to have a united front and not be even any perceptions of any division. And I mean, you guys have really hit the nail on the head that every agency, every department of government is going to come. There's a lot of confusion as to what's going to come with CARES Act money, what's going to come with the American Rescue dollars, and where it's going to have to go to appropriations on the House side and finance on the Senate side. So where we're not united, it works against us. And while as the discussion continues, there's no doubt we need to increase. If there's any group that's not included in there, it's division. So one of the great things about this legislative council is that we get to hear all sides of the spectrum. And again, our co-chairs Chris and Kelly do a great job of allowing the discussion. But at the end of the day, once it leaves this committee, if it's any inkling of any division or somebody gets left behind, you make it easy for the legislature to not touch it, because it's actually a hot potato, and there's so many other hot potatoes out there. So I think the dialogue has to continue, and we have to reach some type of consensus at the appropriate time to come and get the low-hanging fruits, to get those things that we're all on board with, continue to discuss how we move the needle to compensate our people, but not at the cost of not getting anything at all. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I think that those were excellent comments, Senator, and I appreciate that. I know that a lot of people are working really hard to find consensus, and I'm hopeful that, perhaps during the session, we'll be able to all come to some type of agreement. And certainly if we don't, I think you're absolutely right. One of the lessons, unfortunate lessons that might be learned by the community is that if we can't all speak in a single voice, then we're not going to be able to accomplish what we want to do. So I appreciate those comments, and I couldn't agree more. I know we had another hand raised.
Amber.
I think.
I'll be really quick because I know we're short on time, but just a thought. I'm just throwing this out there. What if we took a no position statement and maybe did summarize what do we have consensus about? Like I know I saw Lynette comment in there about she thinks we need to support this because at some level we all can agree we support the raise for these people. Could we take a position that we support the spirit of it, but maybe not the I don't say not the details, but that we need to get greater consensus on how it would be done, so that we don't, I don't want to put out the idea that GACDA doesn't support the spirit of what they're trying to do. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. What we could do, because I think it's not unlike the last one, where I think we all support the spirit of increasing the workforce related to helping children address mental illness or mental health challenges, which we certainly all do. There's division on what the solution looks like exactly, and the devil's in the details. So I wouldn't mind, before we make the recommendation to the council, kind of in the same breath, just saying, we had a very great and interesting slate of proposals. we, decided to recommend X, Y, and Z. However, there were a couple that we've remained neutral on. However, we support them in spirit with respect to these two things. I think so. So it's clear kind of that this is a thoughtful process, and that all these recommendations certainly have merit, but that, we just need a little more work on them until we can find a place where we come to a consensus of support. So I like that idea.
Same.
Okay, so I think that's
Karen Collins has her hand raised.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Chris. I just have one more comment. If given the choice of giving the home and community-based waiver the money that we can give them versus, everybody, even if we can't do something for everybody, I'm in favor of at least somebody getting something. So, I mean, it may not be ideal, but there's an ask on the table that they had, Kelly had mentioned. So at least somebody would get something now, which I do think, that they would really appreciate it and it would help at this point. And then later, if we could get something with the community homes, that would be helpful at that point. So I wouldn't want to discourage us from not moving forward and giving somebody something, even though, from my perspective, I think they all deserve something, but we can do what we can.
Yeah, and I think we can express that to the council as a whole with kind of what Amber had suggested, was supporting the spirit of things without taking a direct position. So I know we're running, we got about 9 minutes left. So those are the two proposals. Getting a little feedback from somebody. Those were the two specific proposals that Kelly, Bambi, and I talked. We felt as though we had at least received indications that there were some there were different opinions on them, I would say, amongst this particular community. Some of them here will probably have disagreements from people outside of the disability community. But we felt the rest of the slate seemed to be pretty clear in their intent, and things that we thought are in the form that they were presented were in fact in the best interest of those that we aim to serve people with disabilities across the spectrum of disabilities, and they aligned well with our policy platforms that we all contributed to and developed. So unless anybody has any objections, I see you, Ann. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm not more questions about the trafficking bill that was proposed this morning, and I'm not ready to take a position on that one yet. I would like more information on how people with survivors with disabilities were included in the conversation on the legislation. I want to make sure there are no unintended consequences, making it more difficult for survivors to come forward if there's a fear of retribution or harsher sentences for people that they know. I'm curious about what has been done in other states and if harsher sentences actually protect survivors or people with disabilities and act as a disincentive. So I have a lot more questions about that. And I'm not ready, if I get a vote for GACDA, to take a position.
Okay, so that's important. Thank you.
Chris, Representative Melinda White is on the line and she can't unmute because she's calling from a phone. So allow her to speak.
Sure, of course.
Hi, yes, this is Rep. White. I apologize, I'm on the road today. I do want to ask a question on this issue of raises, different providers. Have we ever assessed what providers actually pay their workers across the board? Because they don't all do the same. We have some providers that still paying $7.25 an hour, and for years, and that's a problem. And I just want to see if there's ever been an assessment for it. We put it in the budget that LDH would provide a schedule. You know, we put some money in the budget for you all last year, year before, and I don't know that that was done across the board. So some providers do really well with their pay schedules. some don't do anything, and I have a problem with that.
I know that they had some cost reports that were done. And I believe that they do have some data. I know the data that was collected for what the council was moving forward with came from, it was a national survey that was sent out, but only 22% of the people completed it, the national core indicators. I can't speak for all of the providers, but for the ARCs, we have surveyed all of ours and do have like a spreadsheet of what the starting pay is, and then like what's the highest paid, and then also with benefits and stuff. So I can only go on what we have at the ARC. And this,
right, but that's the issue with me is that if the legislator gives more money and it's not used for the people actually helping the disabled community, the ones that are in the homes, the ones that are in the any of them, if they're not used for that purpose, then there's a problem that comes up with some providers really not in it for the right reasons. And I've experienced the issues. Okay, so I would think that we should hold providers accountable for something to show us, not just, volunteer and tell us, what are you doing with the money and where is it going? And is it going to, I know they're in business and they have to make money and that kind of thing, but people that are actually doing the work, we have high turnovers and there's a lot of issues. And it's not like that with all providers, I've come to understand. But I just feel like that for the legislator, we need to know that the monies that we're given is actually going to the services that we're supposed to be providing. And I've had a bad experiences with it with some providers. So, and as far as the difference between one or the other, the ICFs and things like that, there's people that don't have family members, period. And so we're to help them regardless. So there's a need for that as well. But this is a bone I have to pick with some providers that I know did not give their monies toward the people that actually do the work. And I'm talking about for years, some of our workers in our home was $7.25 an hour, period. Never get an increase. I don't know if they've recently increased it since we gave more money, but I made sure that provider knew that's what we were fighting for. But I just would like to know how we assess that and if they're held accountable for what they're doing out in the field. And as far as the monies go, and I know they got to run a business. I'm not unaware of that, but at the same time, I don't like the fact that we have some providers down in the islands all year, and I know of one, and their workers are struggling, not working well with me, and I will do everything I can to protect the disabled community that they can still have these services, but the people that are helping them need to be better than just $7.25 an hour. I stay right here.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate that. Those are all really good points. And I think those are pieces of information that would certainly enlighten, I think, the topic that we're talking about and really get to the crux of whether or not providers, by and large, are using the increases that they've been provided to actually support the direct support workers, the individuals that are most directly involved with the care of some of our state's most vulnerable individuals. So maybe we can get you some of those answers, but I think those are important. Okay, so it looks like there was some, at the end here, there were some questions that were expressed about the human trafficking bill that we wanted to know a little bit more about before we made a recommendation on it. in terms of some unintended consequences. So are folks okay with putting that one in the group of we would like to learn more about it before we make a recommendation? Any objections? Okay. Hearing none, what I would like to do is I'd like to present all the remaining proposals to the council as one slate of legislative ideas that we would recommend the council support at this time. I would like to mention the other three and express that we acknowledge the importance of these ideas, and we acknowledge that human trafficking among people with disabilities is a problem and should be addressed, that the providers do need a rate, but we need, to sparse out some details, and that there is a lack of providers within the mental health region, but we're not sure that decreasing the credentials is the right approach at this time. We're not opposing those, but we're just choosing to keep an eye on them and watch them. But we are recommending that the slate that have been presented do in fact get the support of the council. Is there any opposition to that? Okay, excellent. All right. Well, boy, again, I know we've gone over, but I just want to say on behalf of Kelly and I, we really do appreciate everybody taking their time to explain what can be extremely complicated pieces of policy that are all aimed and all have merit and all work to helping the population that we serve, people with disabilities, and really is the purpose of this committee and the council as a whole. So thank you all so much. And we will see everybody a little later today at the council meeting as a whole. Kelly, Bambi, could you stay on just so we can talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Everyone will be on this link at 12 o'clock, which is the full council meeting. I don't know, Chris, we might need a motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry. Sure. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
This is Karen, I'll motion.
Can we get a second?
I'll second it. This is Jerry.
Excellent. Any opposed? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
So Chris and Kelly, people can stay on this meeting. So I don't know if y'all want to just get on three-way and talk, or how you want to handle it. Or let me stop